Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the noise and deliver the most crucial, compelling, and often surprising truths hidden inside dense research. Today, we are wrestling with a problem that is, it's universal, often misunderstood, and extremely costly to our well-being and our careers: chronic procrastination.
And we're approaching this not with, the superficial time management tips, because those usually fail. We're diving deep into a strategic, research-backed program that's really designed to fundamentally dismantle the psychological engines that drive delay. We're focusing today on the core principles of what's known as the now habit.
That's right. For you, the listener, our mission here is to give you a complete shortcut to understanding the root cause of procrastination, which is, well, it's rarely what you think it is. And we want to equip you with the precise strategic tools you need to shift your whole identity. We want you to stop seeing yourself as a procrastinator and start operating as an efficient, focused, high-performing producer.
And, we have to start by really aggressively redefining the problem. The reason most common advice is just useless, telling someone just break it into small pieces or get organized, is that it completely fails to address the enormous psychological barrier, that wall that exists right at the starting line. It's advice that's focused on the symptom, not the actual cause.
Exactly. It's like telling someone with stage fright, oh, just relax and enjoy yourself.
Right.
They know intellectually what they should be doing, but their nervous system is it's hijacked. The psychological weight of the task is completely overwhelming their ability to just do the simple action.
And that leads us to the crucial new definition. Based on the insights of this program, we realize that procrastination is not a character flaw. It's not a cause, like laziness. Laziness implies apathy, right? And unwillingness to exert effort. Procrastinators are often highly capable, highly motivated people who desperately, desperately want to succeed.
Okay, so if it isn't laziness, what is it?
It's a mechanism. It's a sophisticated, if ultimately destructive mechanism for coping with the anxiety and fear that's associated with starting or continuing or completing any major task or difficult decision.
Wow, that reframes everything. If it's a mechanism to cope with stress, then the person doing it is just seeking immediate relief.
Exactly.
And we know this rings true because the classic chronic procrastinator, they usually do get the job done. They just suffer from this constant unnecessary anxiety in the lead up. And often they diminish the quality of the result because they're so rushed at the very end.
It traps them in this brutal, vicious cycle. It starts when they feel overwhelmed by the sheer scope of a task, which instantly generates this internal pressure.
Right, this feeling of, I have to do this perfectly.
That pressure leads directly to the fear of failure or even the fear of success, which we'll get into a bit later. And to compensate, they try to force themselves to work harder, work longer, which creates this profound resentment toward the task itself.
So they start to hate the very thing they need to do.
And that resentment leads them to lose motivation entirely, which inevitably leads them right back to procrastination as the primary escape strategy.
And the most bitter consequence of this cycle, it isn't even the mediocre product at the end. It's the constant, profound loss of guilt-free leisure. If you are perpetually feeling overwhelmed or constantly guilty about the work you should be doing, any time you spend on genuine play or recreation or even just enjoying time with your family, it feels like a reckless act of shirking your duties.
And when leisure is contaminated by guilt, it ceases to be restorative. It's not rest anymore. You never fully recharge because that inner critical voice, that constant reminder of the deadline, it's always running in the background. The entire strategic goal of the now habit is to decisively interrupt this cycle, to neutralize the fear of failure and the terror of being overwhelmed so that you can focus solely on the immediate question, which is, what can you start now?
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's follow that thread back to the source of the anxiety. If procrastination is a coping mechanism, we have to look directly at the core psychological drivers that are, lighting that internal fire.
The central driver, which is really the foundation of the entire protective mechanism, is the fear of judgment. Procrastination at its heart is a highly effective form of self-defensive behavior. It's aimed at preserving your core self-worth, when that worth is perceived as being under constant, almost existential threat.
And the materials is very clear about where this threat comes from. It's from over-identifying your personal worth with your production output. It's that dangerous self-imposed equation, I am what I do. Or maybe even more chillingly, I am my professional worth.
Precisely. And if your worth as a human being is determined solely by how perfect or profitable or successful your output is, then any potential mistake, any minor criticism, or any failure isn't just an opportunity for improvement. It's potentially devastating to your whole identity. And this belief system, it forces perfectionism and crippling self-criticism to become necessary defenses against a catastrophic collapse.
To make that terrifying weight feel real for everyone, let's look at the anecdote of Claire. She's a young, high-achieving professional whose story is highlighted in the source material. She started to struggle profoundly after getting a poor performance review and became gripped by this fear of being fired.
Claire's entire world just narrowed after that review. She was terrified of making any mistake because it instantly made her feel stupid and incompetent. Crucially, she believed her work had to be superior. It had to be perfect to justify her continued employment and, more importantly, her continued right to exist as a worthy person. Anything less than absolute perfection was just mediocre.
And if she was a mediocre worker, well, she felt worthless as a person. That is an immense emotional burden for a quarterly report to have to bear. So she internalized this impossibly high tyrannical judge. But where did that self-critical voice, the one demanding perfection, come from?
Well, the analysis traces this intense self-criticism back to an early family environment, which Alice Miller famously described as poisonous pedagogy. In Claire's case, she was constantly trying to measure up to her highly successful siblings and felt this heavy expectation from a wealthy father. Her parents adhered to that old-school toxic belief that praise might go to her head. So they withheld it, but they were very quick to supply severe criticism or pressure.
So she grew up internalizing that voice, believing a fundamental part of her was lazy and that she needed intense discipline and pressure and threats just to perform at a basic level.
Exactly. She was locked in this internal conflict. The voice of the threatening parental judge pushing her, and the voice of the scared, inadequate, lazy child who desperately needed to escape that pressure. And this self-inflicted criticism only magnified her anxiety, and therefore it increased her absolute need to escape through delay.
This leads us directly to the power of the fear of failure. When your work carries the enormous weight of determining your personal worth, your future happiness, your social standing, the stress is just intolerable. A release is required, and procrastination is the perfect escape valve.
It allows for the ultimate defense mechanism, which is the ready-made excuse. The thought process is something like, if I delay starting my work until the last possible minute, I cannot possibly do my best. Therefore, any criticism or failure will not be a judgment of the real me or my best effort.
It's psychological deflection. You protect the true core perfect self you believe you possess by sabotaging the effort itself. The failure gets attributed to poor time management, not to a lack of competence or worth.
Yes, because the alternative facing failure head-on with your absolute best effort is simply too dangerous for the perfectionist whose self-worth is that brittle. Now, contrast this protective avoidance with the research of a Yale psychologist, Patricia W. Linville. She found that resilient individuals, people who handle stress well, possess what she called a complex sense of self.
A complex sense of self. What does that mean?
It means they derive their identity and their sense of worth from multiple, varied areas. Their friends, their hobbies, their family, their spiritual life, their creative endeavors, and their career. So if they face stress or failure in one area, say, at their job, those other uncontaminated areas act as a crucial psychological buffer. Failure in one domain doesn't translate to a total collapse of self-worth.
That makes perfect sense. If your identity is a 10-legged stool and one leg breaks, you're fine. But if your identity is a one-legged stool resting entirely on the success of this one presentation, and that presentation wobbles, the whole thing just crashes down.
Precisely. And then there is the equally insidious driver, the fear of success. Which seems counterintuitive, right? Why would a driven person be afraid of succeeding?
I always find this one fascinating. It feels like the universe is playing a trick on you.
It really does. It involves three central issues that push people toward procrastination. The first is relational conflict. Success often forces rapid change, and sometimes friends or family members might resent your newfound ambition or time commitment or focus. So you're forced into this terrible dilemma. Choose my career or choose my existing relationships. Procrastination keeps you safe within that familiar, less successful group.
The second is facing painful disincentives. Success means higher visibility, maybe moving to a new city or inheriting overwhelming new responsibilities and administrative burdens that you absolutely dread. It forces you out of your comfortable, familiar rut.
And the third issue brings us right back to that fear cycle. It's called delayed fear of failure, or the pole vaulter syndrome.
I love that phrase. Explain the syndrome.
So if you clear a difficult bar, if you succeed in one task, the expectations are instantly and sometimes permanently raised for the next task. Success is no longer fun. It's terrifying because, as researchers have noted, the bar just keeps moving higher. The higher you go, the more competitive it becomes, and the greater the likelihood that you will fail next time.
So success feels less like an achievement and more like a fast track to a guaranteed future failure because you know eventually you'll hit a height you just can't clear.
And procrastination provides a double protection here. It gives you an immediate excuse if you don't perform well. Now, oh, I only had 3 days to work on it. And crucially, it maintains some reserve of ability in the eyes of others. You suggest that if you had really tried, if you had given it your absolute best effort, you could have done better. And that offers protection against those mounting future expectations.
We also see procrastination used as an expression of anger or resentment, and it's often directed toward authority figures who create those infuriating classic no-win dilemmas.
That feeling of being a helpless victim, controlled by external forces, whether it's the government requiring taxes or the boss demanding an unnecessary report, it generates this deep, simmering resentment. And if you can't express that anger directly for fear of losing your job or social standing, it just surfaces indirectly through procrastination.
The source material gives a fantastic example of this with a guy named Larry, a production supervisor. He had felt passed over for promotions several times and had grown deeply bitter toward his manager, Bill.
Right. Larry couldn't openly challenge Bill, but he exerted this subtle power. He would forget key details or delay reports that Bill requested until the last minute, just making Bill's job harder. Larry was using his delay as a weapon, a sort of passive-aggressive assertion of control over an authority figure he resented. He felt entitled to his bitterness because he felt stuck and powerless.
And that's why the victim's mantra is always, I have to. Larry felt forced, mandated, controlled. His path out required challenging that deep-seated victim message.
Yes. He had to stop seeing his employment as a mandate imposed by Bill and replace it with the empowering language of an adult making conscious choices. I choose. He chose to stay for the salary, for the benefits, and he committed to doing the job well because he chose that outcome. He began to operate with initiative, challenging the belief that he was powerless.
And once he changed his internal dialogue and his behavior shifting from I have to make Bill happy to I choose to perform well because I value my employment, his relationship with Bill normalized, and his procrastination just vanished. He stopped making himself a victim, and the resentment that fueled the delay was removed.
This all brings us to the foundational, absolutely indispensable step for breaking the procrastination cycle: creating safety. You must completely neutralize the internal threat before you can take any effective action.
And the source uses a brilliant and really unforgettable metaphor to visualize the psychological risk, the boardwalking scenario.
Let's walk through the levels. Imagine situation A, a wide, solid, 2-inch thick board placed flat on the ground. Walking it requires no concentration. You can skip, dance, or leap across it. The task is simple.
Okay, now imagine situation B. That exact same board, identical in size and width, but suspended 100 feet above concrete pavement. The task itself, walking, is exactly the same degree of difficulty. But suddenly, you're frozen. You are paralyzed.
Your entire focus shifts instantly from the simplicity of the task to the catastrophic consequence of error, death, or in our case, intolerable failure. The adrenaline spikes, the brain freezes, and the simple action of walking becomes impossible.
The action itself hasn't changed, but the perceived risk has become existential.
But now consider situation D. The board is still 100 feet up, but now a strong supportive safety net is positioned just 3 feet beneath it. Suddenly, that existential fear is neutralized.
The immediate reaction is, oh, I can do this now. Even if I fell, I would just bounce in the net.
Yeah.
The worst possible outcome is embarrassment, a momentary discomfort, not catastrophe.
That is the core insight for overcoming procrastination. You must actively create that strong, protected, and indisputable sense of inherent worth. You have to guarantee yourself, whatever happens, whether this report is a success or a total failure, whether I'm criticized or praised, my self-worth will survive. I make myself safe. This psychological safety net allows you to finally concentrate on the work itself, rather than constantly worrying about your own survival.
And without that net, the procrastinator creates the high wire act, but then instead of finding the safety net, they light a fire under themselves to force action. Let's trace the 5-stage anxiety mechanism that generates this terrible self-sabotaging cycle.
Okay, stage 1 is the setup. You give the task the power to determine your worth. Self-worth equals performance. Too much is riding on a single output.
Stage 2 is the magnification. Perfectionism kicks in and raises the task 100 feet above the ground, making any minor mistake or failure completely intolerable. The stakes are now astronomical.
Stage 3 is the freeze. Anxiety and dread immediately set in, initiating the stress response that drains energy away from production.
Stage 4 is the escape. Procrastination is used as that temporary relief valve, allowing you to escape the internal dilemma. However, this delay simultaneously brings the external deadline, the fire, closer and closer.
And the fifth, and really the tragic final stage. The deadline fire forces action. The imminent threat of external consequence finally overrides the paralyzing perfectionism, allowing you to rush across the board. The work gets done, but the cycle is reinforced, teaching your subconscious that only extreme, panic-fueled pressure truly works.
And as the source material points out, it is a convoluted and costly device. All the energy that should be going into thoughtful, measured work is instead consumed by internal conflict, by anxiety, and these exhausting avoidance strategies. To break this deeply ingrained habit, we need to reprogram the self-talk that starts the conflict in the first place.
We have to target the self-alienation that's inherent in the procrastinator's language. When you talk to yourself in an authoritarian voice, using terms like, I have to do this, or I should be doing that, you immediately communicate this inner conflict. You're signaling that one part of you is applying pressure and the other part is actively resisting.
I don't want to do this, but the external world or my internal parent mandates that I force myself. That language instantly creates feelings of external pressure, resentment, and victimhood, which are the exact psychological conditions that favor the defensive use of procrastination.
Think about Betty, the administrator who felt completely overwhelmed by her annual report. She wasted weeks complaining, I have to do the annual report, feeling like a powerless victim under this massive burden. It led to fatigue, insomnia, and zero progress.
So the prescription for Betty was to challenge every single instance of I have to with an adult, conscious decision, either choose how she would begin the project or explain to her superior why she would not do it. And she chose the former, picking the part of the report she hated the least as her starting point.
And that shift from passive victimhood to active, conscious commitment is the core of the producer mindset.
But I have to push back a little here. What if the task is genuinely mandatory? I mean, what if I truly have to file taxes or pay a bill or face serious legal or financial penalties? How do I honestly feel I choose to in a genuine no-win scenario?
That's an excellent point, and the distinction is crucial. When you encounter a genuinely mandatory task, the goal is to shift your perspective from choosing the task to choosing the consequence. You don't choose the task, you choose to avoid the intolerable consequence. For example, I don't have to pay the bills, but I choose to pay the bills because I choose to remain financially solvent and avoid the stress of court action. The choice isn't about enjoying the task, it's about taking responsibility for the desired outcome. It replaces the feeling of being forced by a resented authority with personal agency.
I see. So it frames the action as a proactive choice driven by my own long-term goals, not a reaction to external pressure.
Exactly. And the Now habit gives us 5 strategic self-talk replacements to really solidify this shift.
Let's detail these 5 essential tools. Number 1 is that fundamental shift from coercion to commitment.
Right. Replace I have to with I choose to. This is the language of empowerment. It directs all that previously scattered energy toward a single personally valued goal. It takes the power away from the external authority and puts it back in your hands.
Number 2, shifting focus from distant, overwhelming completion to immediate executable action.
Replace I must finish this entire thesis with when can I start this specific small section? Finishing is vague, it's overwhelming, it's potentially years away. Starting is clear, directed, and manageable now. The moment you hear yourself thinking about the distant deadline, this catchphrase acts like an immediate feedback device, pushing your focus back to the immediate next step.
Number 3 is managing the terror of overwhelm, which is, it's arguably the biggest trigger for the anxiety mechanism.
Replace the thought, this project is so big and important I can never do it, with I can take one small, imperfect step. This reminds you that you don't have to pour the entire foundation of the skyscraper today. You only need to write one rough, imperfect draft, or make one small phone call, or organize one section of your notes. One small step is something you know you can accomplish now, and that breaks the paralysis.
Number 4, attacking the source of the anxiety perfectionism directly.
Replace I must be perfect with I aim for excellence, not perfection, and I will bounce back from mistakes. The source material makes an essential observation here. The fear of making mistakes actually makes failures more likely because it leads to paralysis and a lack of preparation. A producer accepts mistakes as inevitable feedback and makes a bounce-back plan, which a perfectionist can never do. You have to give yourself permission to be perfectly human.
And finally, number 5, guaranteeing renewal and preventing burnout.
Replace the workaholic self-talk of, I don't have time to play, with the strategic command, I must take time to play. This is so crucial. It lessens the dread associated with difficult work by guaranteeing that your effort will not lead to deprivation and isolation. Knowing you have a firm, scheduled commitment to recreation in the near future instantly increases feelings of inner worth and respect for yourself.
That concept of guaranteeing renewal feeds directly into the pull method of motivation, which is just central to the effectiveness of the entire system.
Traditional methods, they all rely on the push method, using threats, fear, or guilt to stimulate action. But pushing a person generates random escape behavior, not directed action toward a goal. The pull method, conversely, uses rewards, inquisitiveness, and pleasure to draw you toward the goal.
The fundamental flaw of the push method is that distant, indefinite rewards, like a promotion that might happen in 3 years, have virtually no motivational power today. Future promises just can't control present action.
That's why immediate, definite rewards like scheduled, guilt-free leisure or exercise must be strategically interlaced with short work periods. You make the work shorter, less intimidating, and the rewards more frequent and immediate, thus building powerful positive associations. Think of the difference between trying to push a giant boulder uphill, which is the push method, versus placing a delicious guaranteed meal at the top of the hill and letting that draw you up. That's the pull method.
The anecdote of Jeff, the college professor, really brings this home. He was completely stuck, unable to complete a single scholarly paper, and just consumed by guilt over his perceived lack of dedication. He had tried every method of self-pressure and failed.
His counselor gave him truly shocking advice. Stop the self-torture and commit seriously to something he loved just for the sheer joy of it. Jeff chose to commit to acting with a local community theater. And this was a massive commitment, requiring 20 to 30 hours a week for rehearsals and performance.
So he essentially took a massive chunk of his available time and just dedicated it to play. How did this not make the work guilt even worse?
It didn't, because he was following the command, I must take time to play. He had zero time left to feel guilty about his professional writing. He enjoyed the acting so much, it was true, guilt-free leisure, that he felt rested and profoundly satisfied. And crucially, he learned that he could commit himself effectively to finding 20-plus quality hours a week for an important commitment when that commitment was a labor of love.
That experience was the pull. It taught him experientially that life did not have to be deprivation, and that commitment could be joyful, not burdensome. So when he returned to his academic article, he reorganized his schedule to include non-negotiable commitments to friends and exercise. And this meant his writing periods had to be short, focused, and efficient. Finding 10 focused hours a week for writing was suddenly easy after he successfully cleared 20 for acting.
And this leads us directly to the core tactical tool of the program, the unschedule. This is pure behavioral psychology genius because it uses reverse psychology against our natural resistance to authority.
Right, the unscheduled system demands that you prioritize and schedule playtime first, and it initially limits your work time, which feels completely counterintuitive to the chronic procrastinator.
That's the point. It disarms the internal resistance. The commitment is to start working for no more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes is such a short duration that it doesn't trigger that high-wire act anxiety. It's too short to be intimidating, but it is precisely enough time to build positive momentum and instantly earn an immediate scheduled reward.
It challenges the ingrained belief that you must force yourself to work for hours on end, or that work has to be miserable. Instead, it flips the pressure. You must exercise, you must take one full day off, and do not work more than 20 quality hours a week on this project. That built-up subconscious desire to achieve is then allowed to emerge on its own terms.
And this requires strict discipline with the unscheduled guidelines. We have to understand not just what the rules are, but why they are structured this way. There are 11 essential steps, refined through years of behavioral practice.
Let's walk through these slowly and explain the strategic purpose of each rule.
The first rule is the foundation of the entire approach. 1. Schedule only non-work activities first. This means every meal, sleep, commuting, free time, recreation, socializing, and exercise must be blocked out. You do not schedule work projects initially.
Why is it absolutely essential that we schedule non-work first? Why not just estimate time and hope we fit play in?
Because it cures the fantasy of unlimited time. The chronic procrastinator often maintains this subconscious fantasy that they actually have 24 hours a day available to work, which allows them to delay indefinitely. By filling in the non-negotiables first, you are forced to confront a realistic image of the extremely limited quality time available, making it precious and manageable. You realize the time you have must be focused.
That's powerful. Okay, rule number 2 then deals with accountability after the fact.
2. Fill in work projects only after completing at least 1/2 hour. The unschedule is a time clock that records progress after it happens. This prevents you from scheduling 7 hours of work that you only perform for 10 minutes. You only get credit for actual sustained performance.
And what defines sustained performance leads us to rule 3.
3. Take credit only for periods of at least 30 minutes of uninterrupted quality work. This reinforces a necessary discipline of staying with the task for the first few minutes, pushing through the initial inertia and the impulse to, check a phone or wander off. The recorded time must represent real focused effort.
Rule 4 establishes the positive reinforcement loop of the pull method.
4. Reward yourself with a break or enjoyable task immediately after working. This creates those vital positive associations. You earned that reward just by starting and sustaining 30 minutes of quality effort. The brain begins to associate the initial effort with immediate pleasure, not deprivation.
Rule 5 provides the measure of success.
5. Keep track of quality hours, work daily and weekly. This shifts the emphasis from vague feelings of failure or guilt to concrete, demonstrable achievement. For example, Fran, an assistant manager, categorized her work into A, B, or C priorities and only counted quality time spent on the high-priority A projects that contributed to her long-term goals. She wasn't just working, she was achieving specific goals.
Rule 6 is the ultimate antidote to burnout and the resentment cycle.
6. Always leave at least one full day a week off from any work. This is non-negotiable. Procrastination and workaholism are often two sides of the same anxiety coin. This day ensures guaranteed rejuvenation and prevents the buildup of resentment that will trigger the cycle all over again.
Rule 7 is arguably the cleverest use of behavioral redirection, Grandma's principle.
7. Grandma's principle. Before deciding to go to a pleasurable activity, take time for just 30 minutes of work on the project. This uses the incredible pull of the pleasurable activity, going out, meeting friends, to help you start the difficult one. You get the momentum started, and then you enjoy your leisure completely guilt-free because you met your commitment.
And the final rules hammer home the focus on the moment.
8. Focus on starting. The only task you truly have is to get to the starting place on time. Replace all thoughts about the outcome or the deadline with thoughts about when, where, and on what you can start now.
9. Think small. Do not aim to finish a massive chapter. Aim for just 30 minutes of focused work. Small goals prevent anxiety from escalating.
10. Keep starting. Finishing is simply the result of consistent starting. The final stage of a project is just another act of starting. The start of the conclusion, the start of the editing. Finishing will take care of itself.
And Rule 11, which is designed to build momentum for the next day.
11. Never end down. Never stop when you are blocked, frustrated, or at the end of a natural section. Push through for 5 or 10 minutes to solve a block or to start the very next section, even if it's just the title. This creates positive momentum and reduces the inertia, making it exponentially easier to start the next time.
This is a robust system that essentially weaponizes your natural resistance and desire for fun against your old self-defeating habits. By scheduling play, we limit the time available for work, which forces extreme efficiency and reduces the time available for anxiety.
Now that we have the schedule and the language, we need tools to overcome the 3 primary psychological blocks that cause the freeze: the terror of being overwhelmed, the fear of not finishing, and the struggle to enter peak performance.
The terror of being overwhelmed is often caused by what is called two-dimensional thinking. You see the project as one giant, exhausting leap, collapsing all the future steps into one stressful moment.
And the antidote is 3-dimensional thinking and the reverse calendar. This technique requires you to mentally spread the work out over time and distance. You start with the final, hard deadline and work backward, creating self-imposed deadlines, sub-goals, for smaller, manageable subdivisions along the way.
So instead of focusing on the final submission date 6 months out, you create deadlines for the first chapter outline in 2 weeks, the first rough draft in a month, the peer review submission, and so on.
This approach completely diffuses that condensed effort. You are no longer facing an impossible mountain. You are facing only small, manageable hills. You gain control over the perceived time constraints, and you create space to learn, rest, and appreciate the concrete accomplishments as you complete each sub-goal.
Next, we tackle the persistent problem of the fear of not finishing, which requires persistent starting. Many procrastinators can start, but they trip themselves up near the end when the stakes feel highest.
And this often happens because they lose sight of the fact that procrastinating on finishing actually takes more effort and generates more pain than following through.
That's the painful but liberating realization Laura, the marathon runner, had when she hit the wall 7 miles from the finish line.
Yes, her body was screaming. She was in agony and wanted desperately to stop. But she had a moment of clarity. She thought, I'm in pain. It hurts to run, but it hurts just to stand here and hurt. It hurts to walk. Regardless of what I choose to do, I will be in pain, so I might as well run and get it over with as soon as possible.
The ultimate lesson is the choice between the pain of pushing through and the exhausting, high effort work of avoidance and guilt. Laura chose to focus only on the next step. I can take one more step. That mindset of persistent starting must be applied even in the final polishing stages.
And finally, we address how to achieve peak performance, bypassing the struggle and fear entirely by accessing the flow state.
The flow state, or the zone, is that wonderful shift in consciousness where the mind functions at its peak. Time is distorted, concentration is effortless, and the critical function is suspended, leading to peak performance without the drudgery that causes avoidance.
The mechanism here is the temporary suspension of the critical function. We have to understand that the logical, critical left hemisphere must be temporarily put on hold to allow the creative, intuitive right hemisphere to start the flow of ideas. If you criticize the work before the ideas have even begun, you guarantee blockage.
The first draft is not meant to be perfect. The critical editor should be invited into the room only after the initial mental beachhead has been established.
And we can access this creative, focused state on command using a simple procedure called focusing. It's a powerful 2-minute mental drill designed to replace stress and guilt with a present-focused, stress-free state.
Let's detail the steps for the listener, as this is a tangible, immediate tool they can use right now.
The drill begins with deep, intentional breathing while intentionally releasing any physical tension. Then, you dedicate 3 slow, deep breaths to letting go of the past. This means specifically shedding past failures, past criticisms, and the critical self-image you have of yourself as a procrastinator. You are done with that.
Next, 3 more breaths dedicated to letting go of the future. This means intentionally shedding worries about the deadlines, the outcome, the criticisms, or the consequences of the project. You are clearing the runway of guilt and dread.
And finally, the critical step, centering in the present with 3 more slow, deep breaths. While doing this, as you count up from 1 to 3, you give yourself positive suggestions. You associate your desk or workspace with calm, alert, focused energy. You state an eagerness to start working at a genius level or peak performance.
This links your conscious energy with your subconscious creative faculty, making just do it an immediate possibility, bypassing the old fear-based patterns.
And to maintain this flow, we also need a structured way to handle the inevitable distractions that are the mind's immediate search for escape.
The source identifies 5 types of distractions. First, strong emotions. These are serious life issues, a fight with a loved one, or severe financial concerns that you are using work to avoid.
If you are confronting a strong, disruptive emotion, you need immediate, structured time, not procrastination time, to plan how you will cope. Take 10 minutes to write down a specific action plan and then return to your work knowing you have a strategy in place.
Second, warnings of danger, such as adrenaline rushes from pressure messages like, I have to finish by Wednesday or I'll be ruined. These need to be countered by removing the threat and reapplying the safety net.
Third, to-do reminders. The mundane stuff like buy milk or call the dentist. Do not act on them. Write them down immediately on a designated pad. They can be addressed after completing your 30 minutes of quality work, using them as small rewards for focus.
Fourth, escape fantasies. The classic daydreams about food, vacations, or, yes, sex, which are common when anticipating long periods of deprivation. We all get them.
Absolutely. We get them because the body is looking for pleasure. Record them quickly, use them to plan future guilt-free playtime, which minimizes their disruptive power, and then return to the task.
And fifth, UFOs, unidentified flights of originality. Those sudden, seductive, creative thoughts that are brilliant but have nothing to do with the task at hand.
Write them down quickly. Let them fly by undisturbed, and return to your current work. By using these focusing techniques and managing distractions strategically, you gain control over your work environment, preventing your fears and internal impulses from dictating your day.
Now, let's pivot to application. What if the person struggling with procrastination is an employee you manage or a partner you live with?
Effective management requires avoiding the critical self-talk procrastinators use on themselves. The manager must never take the role of the parental judge. Demands for compliance, you have to, you should, will only produce passive resistance and antagonism, reinforcing their inner cycle.
Instead, effective managers invite genuine commitment. And this is achieved by delegating authority and allowing choices over how work is performed. When employees feel they have ownership and control over the process, they naturally drop resistance and commit their intrinsic motivation.
Managers should consistently focus on starting, not finishing. Structure tasks into manageable parts with near-term deadlines. Instead of saying, finish the whole proposal by Friday, you ask, what can you get to me in rough form, even if it's just bullet points by noon tomorrow?
That simple framing, rough form, near-term deadline successfully circumvents the employee's perfectionism and eliminates the feeling of being overwhelmed. It shifts the focus to a manageable first step that the employee can start immediately.
And the use of praise is absolutely critical. Praise must be abundant, specific, and it has to precede even the mildest recommendation for improvement. For instance, I really liked the research methodology you used with the Jones account. That was solid work. And I think you could achieve even better results if you prioritize sending the final results to the central office by the established deadline.
That structure affirms their competence, tells them precisely what was correct, and gives constructive direction without triggering the fear of failure response.
Finally, when living with a procrastinator, the key is avoiding the destructive nagging trap. As the partner, we tend to take their delay personally, but their procrastination is a learned, protective reaction to pressure, not a personal insult to us.
So if the partner escalates the pressure, why haven't you started packing? We're going to be late.
They are just playing the role of the parental judge, which the procrastinator is hardwired to resist.
The solution is radically counterintuitive. You have to confess your own need for punctuality and control, framing your actions as a choice driven by your own boundaries. Use the language of choice to describe your actions, not theirs.
So instead of you need to get ready, you might say something like, I know you are more adaptable than I am, but I feel compelled to start packing now to avoid getting too anxious. I choose to leave the house at 7:30 sharp because that is when I feel comfortable. Exactly. You are communicating your boundary without applying pressure. This forces the procrastinator to face their own commitment to the event or action without feeling coerced by an outside authority figure. You're focusing entirely on your own boundaries and choices, not their perceived flaw.
This entire framework, the now habit, is a powerful integrated strategy. It blends positive self-talk, scheduled play, flow state techniques, and persistent starting into a strategic system for high performance that respects the reality of human psychology.
And the requirement here is a firm, unwavering commitment. The classic defeatist statement, it's not working, must be permanently replaced with the proactive producer's question, how can I make this work for me? You must commit to the system, not just try it for a few days.
Because the final liberating truth we want you to walk away with, drawing on the wisdom of William James, is profound. Nothing is so fatiguing as the eternal hanging on of an uncompleted task.
You cannot escape work. Every single time you choose to procrastinate and feel guilt or anxiety or internal conflict, you are simply trading productive, rewarding, focused work for the exhausting, high-effort work of self-punishment and worry.
The actual true choice you have is not between working and not working. It's about which kind of work you are choosing to do today, the exhausting work of avoidance or the rewarding work of persistent starting.
Now that you have the tools to create your safety net and start small, go make that first guilt-free 30-minute commitment.